There was another part of the economy I wasn't expecting to find on the Sunday Times tax list this year, and I have to be honest, somewhat concerning, somewhat disconcerting.
There are three certainties in life: death, taxes, and the Sunday Times tax list. The younger sibling of the rich list, this is the annual rundown of HMRC's BFFs, the top taxpayers in the land. Looking at this list, the industry dominating the top of the list is not one that I expected. Explain what it is and what accounts for it being there.
So I thought it'd be interesting to look at the total volume of tax across the seven lists, and as I say, look at which industries seem to contribute the most. Gambling came top. Gambling, yes. And when you think about it, there is a bit of a logic to this, actually, that for 3 years the list was topped by one family, the Denise Coates and her family, behind Bet365, that online betting Goliath.
She has an enormous salary, doesn't she?
She does, and that's a big part of it. So she actually took a pay cut this year, Luke.
Bless her.
Just under £100 million rather than the 220 odd of the year before. Now, I've been told by people close to the company that actually, rather than paying themselves all in dividends, which incurs tax at a lower rate, one of the reasons she pays herself a higher salary is that she wants to be seen to be paying a lot of tax. But Bet365 and the Coateses, they don't just pay taxes on their salaries, taxes on their dividends. They don't just pay corporation tax, but because they're a betting company, they pay this sort of band of this group of different gambling specific levies, betting duties and other things. And that accounts for a huge part of their number. Now, actually, the Coateses, they topped the tax list for 2020, 2021, 2022, but they've slipped down to 3 this year, but they still do contributing £265 million to the Exchequer this year.
When you say the Coates family, it's not just Denise. There's two others as well, aren't there?
That's right. So there's John, her brother, who she started that business with in a porter cabin pitched in a car park in Stoke-on-Trent all those years ago, in about the year 2000. And then her father, Peter, who was an old school gambling man, really. He's still going strong, is Peter, but he ran the family's betting shops. And Denise took them over in the late 90s after university. And it was her, and very much her, who saw the possibilities of online gambling, that you could, if she stayed in bricks and mortar bookie shops, then they could build a chain, they could possibly build a very big chain, but the internet would allow them to build this global online operation, which they have.
So that's the Bet365 lot. What's one of the other big betting companies on this list?
Well, above the Coateses this year, and it's the first time I think they've been above the Coateses, are the Dunn brothers, Fred and Peter Dunn, best known for Betfred, that high street chain.
Is Betfred named after Fred Dunn? Is that why it's called Betfred?
Exactly.
There you go.
So, interesting story. Grew up in a very poor part of Greater Manchester. Their father was an illegal bookie. It's well known that he was taking bets before betting shops were effectively legalised in the early 60s. And they used to work for him, but they went legit. Why did they go legit? Well, a key part of their story, of the Betfred folklore, is that Fred put a bet on England to win the 1966 World Cup at 8-1. He won 200 quid, and that was part of his seed funding to buy his first betting shop the next year. There are now 1,300 betting shops in the chain, and like Bet365, it pays corporation tax, yes, it pays employers national insurance, but it pays all these other duties to the Exchequer as well. And there will be people who find it sort of vaguely disconcerting, the huge sums that we're talking about here, and positive in some way that this is an industry that contributes a lot, but at the same time, there will be people listening to this who who rightly point out that there is a cost to the public purse of problem gambling as well. So gambling, massive for the exchequer, very, very important. But there was another part of the economy, another sector, who I wasn't expecting to find on the Sunday Times tax list this year, and I have to be honest, somewhat concerning, somewhat disconcerting. I wasn't expecting to find two asylum hoteliers on the Sunday Times tax list. I have to be honest here. And bear with me on this. These people are on the list because of money that they're getting from the taxpayer, making money out, profiting from, and therefore they're so successful that they're paying a lot of tax that then goes back to the exchequer. So it's almost cash back for the taxpayer in a way. But I'm talking about two people. I'm talking about Alex Langsam, who runs Britannia Hotels, many of which of his hotels have been handed over, block booked by the Home Office to house those seeking asylum in the UK. And then a very different type of entrepreneur called Graham King, who runs a company called Clear Springs, who his company earns £1.8 billion a year, largely from housing, feeding and transporting asylum seekers around the south of England and Wales.
And we've had a lot of asylum seekers coming to the UK for ages. So why this year have they made an appearance?
The profits have, in Graham King's case, have gone up hugely. I mean, they've gone up by 60%. Clear Springs, his business, made a profit of £120 million last year, which was, as I say, 60% up on the year before. And when your profits go up, you pay more corporation tax, generally speaking, unless you indulging in clever financial engineering.
And Graham King, who you mentioned there, I mean, who is he? What's his background?
Extraordinary figure, really. I mean, this is a guy in his mid-50s, came from Canvey Island. His family ran nightclubs and minicab firms. He ran a minicab firm in his youth. Used to organise teen discos, and only 12 years ago started putting together this business that has provided this sort of gamut of services for the Home Office and for local authorities. As I said, not just housing asylum seekers, but arranging accommodation for them, but providing all those services that they need as well in terms of food and transportation and things like that. A very different type of person from the other guy I mentioned, Alex Langsam, elderly gentleman in his mid-80s now, started out as an estate agent before buying a series of hotels. You might have stayed in one of his hotels, Luke. I don't know, Britannia. Have you ever come across Britannia hotels?
Yeah.
Cheap as chips. It's possible to get a room in a Britannia.
Not the lap of luxury, I would suggest.
No. I mean, people who say, well, you get what you pay for. I mean, £27 a night. It's been possible to stay in a Britannia hotel for, and rated by which the Consumer Group as the worst hotel in Britain for, wait for it, 11 successive years, I believe. They're not luxurious by any stretch of imagination, and he has given over large numbers of his hotels, of his chain, to the Home Office. Interesting fact, Alex Langsam was himself a refugee to this country. He and his parents fled the Nazi invasion or annexation of Austria in 1938. He was less than 1 year old at the time, and he came to this country. I was initially held in a detention centre on the Isle of Man, and despite a pretty tough start in life, has built up this very, very successful property empire.
Have Langsam or King responded to this in any way? I mean, have they engaged with you or?
They don't engage with what we do. I wrote a piece about Langsam last year, trying to get under the skin of this very mercurial, very interesting person. And yes, three approaches, no interest in no interest in talking to me, unfortunately. But I did manage to get to someone who'd worked for him just as I was dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that piece. And he made the case, which I think is very interesting, which some listeners might find persuasive, was that it wasn't Langsam who went to the Home Office and wanted to make a lot of money from housing asylum seekers and refugees. It's the Home Office who came to him, and he's providing a service. And we do have a problem. We do need decent accommodation for to house people who are trying to seek asylum in this country, and he is providing that service. And if it's not going to be him, if it's not going to be Graham King making a lot of money from doing so, then who's going to do it? It will be someone else.
And where are each of those on the list in this 100?
So Graham King pops in at number 40 of our run of 100, and Mr. Langsam is further down at number 87.
That's the story from the Times and the Sunday Times. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.